Captain Maria Torres stood on the bridge of the UES horizon, watching the stars drift by through the massive viewport. The ship had been traveling through the Outer Rim territories for 3 months now, mapping new star systems and collecting data on possible colony worlds. It was routine work, the kind that paid the bills but rarely made headlines back on Earth. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's engines and the occasional beep from the sensor stations. Her crew of 200 was well-trained and experienced, most of them veterans of deep space missions. They had worked together for over 2 years, and Torres trusted them completely. Lieutenant David Park sat at the communications station, monitoring the usual background chatter of space traffic and automated signals from distant probes. He had been doing this job for so long that he could identify most signal types just by their pattern on his screen. That's why the new signal caught his attention immediately, Captain Park called out, his voice cutting through the bridge's quiet atmosphere. I'm picking up something unusual. It's not like anything in our database. Torres walked over to his station and looked at the display. The signal was weak and intermittent, barely strong enough to register on their sensors. But there was something about its structure that seemed artificial, purposeful. Can you clean it up? Park's fingers moved quickly across his console, applying various filters and amplification algorithms. Slowly, the signal became clearer. It wasn't just random noise or natural phenomena. There was a pattern to it, a structure that suggested intelligence. It's definitely artificial, Captain. The format is completely unknown. It's not using any communication protocols we've ever seen. Dr. Rebecca Hayes, the ship's xenobiologist and communications expert, looked up from her research station. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind, known throughout the fleet for her ability to decode alien languages and communication systems. Let me take a look at it, she said. Moving to join them at the communications station, Hayes studied the signal for several minutes, her brow furrowed in concentration. She ran it through the ship's advanced translation algorithms and compared it against every known communication system in human records. This is fascinating, she said finally. The signal appears to be some kind of mathematical progression, but it's embedded with what looks like crude pictographs. Whoever sent this is trying very hard to communicate with someone, anyone who might be listening. Torres felt a chill run down her spine. In all of humanity's expansion into space, they had never encountered another intelligent species. There had been plenty of speculation, of course, and the scientists all agreed that life must exist elsewhere in the galaxy. But this was the first real evidence that they weren't alone. Can you translate it? Torres asked. Hayes nodded slowly. I think so. Give me some time to work on it. For the next 6 hours, Hayes worked tirelessly to decode the message. The rest of the bridge crew watched in fascination as she slowly pieced together the meaning of the alien communication. The signal repeated every few minutes, which gave her multiple samples to work with. Finally, she looked up from her console with exhaustion. Clear on her face. I've got it, she said quietly. The message is simple, but desperate. It translates roughly to help us. We are dying. Please help us. The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at Hayes, trying to process what they had just heard. The first message from an alien civilization, and it was a cry for help. There's more. Hayes continued. The signal includes crude star charts showing their location and what appears to be visual data, images of some kind. Show us, Torres ordered. Hayes transferred the data to the main view screen. The images were grainy and distorted, but they showed clearly that the senders were not human. The creatures in the images were tall and slender, with elongated limbs and faces that looked almost plant-like. They had large eyes that seemed to express deep sadness and fear. More disturbing were the other images in the transmission. They showed what appeared to be massive destruction. Cities reduced to rubble, bodies scattered across landscapes, and scenes of what could only be described as mass slaughter. My God, whispered Commander James Wilson, Torres' second in command. What happened to them? Hayes continued analyzing the data. Based on the star charts, they're located about 15 light-years from our current position. That puts them in the Kepler 442 system. Torres stared at the images on the screen. The faces of the alien beings seemed to look directly at her, pleading for help across the vast emptiness of space. She had joined Starfleet to explore the unknown and make contact with other civilizations. But she had never imagined it would happen like this. Captain Park interrupted her thoughts. I'm also detecting what appears to be military communication chatter from the same system. Different signal patterns, much more aggressive in nature. Hayes quickly analyzed the new signals. Her face grew pale as she worked.
Oh.
These signals are coming from a different species, she reported. The communication style is completely different, more structured, more organized. And based on the content I can decode, they appear to be coordinating some kind of military operation. Torres felt sick to her stomach. The implications were clear. One alien species was crying out for help, while another was apparently destroying them. What does Starfleet protocol say about this situation? Wilson asked quietly. Torres knew the answer without checking the regulations. The Prime Directive was clear: no interference in the affairs of alien civilizations. They were supposed to observe and report, nothing more. Making contact could contaminate alien cultures and change the natural course of their development. But looking at the desperate faces on the view screen, Torres found it hard to care about protocol. These beings were facing extinction, and they had sent their plea into the vast darkness of space, hoping that someone somewhere would hear them and help. Captain Hayes said softly, "The signal is getting weaker. Whatever is happening to them, it's happening fast. Based on the degradation in their transmission equipment, I estimate they have perhaps weeks, maybe less." Torres closed her eyes and made her decision. She knew it could end her career and possibly lead to court-martial. But she also knew she would never be able to live with herself if she turned away from beings who were crying out for help. "Plot a course for the Kepler 442 system," she ordered. "Maximum speed." Wilson looked at her with concern. "Captain, you know what this means?" "Starfleet Command will not approve of this decision." Torres nodded grimly. "I know. But I also know that I didn't join Starfleet to ignore people who need help, no matter what species they are. We're going to investigate this signal, and if these beings truly need help, we're going to do what we can to provide it." The crew exchanged glances, but no one objected. They had all seen the images, heard the desperation in that simple message. They were explorers and scientists, but they were also human beings with consciences. As the horizon changed course and jumped to faster than light speed, Torres stood on the bridge staring at the stars rushing past. She knew that whatever they found at their destination would change everything, not just for her crew, but for all of humanity. The first contact with an alien civilization was supposed to be a moment of celebration and wonder. Instead, it was beginning with a cry for help. And what appeared to be an act of genocide? Torres only hoped they would arrive in time to make a difference. The horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. What they found there made the entire crew fall silent in horror. The third planet, which should have been a thriving world based on the distress signals they had received, was scarred with massive burn marks visible even from space. Entire continents showed the telltale signs of orbital bombardment. The night side of the planet glowed with the fires of burning cities. "Sensors are picking up massive energy signatures across the planet's surface," reported Lieutenant Lisa Chen from the science station. "It looks like multiple cities are under attack right now." Torres gripped the arm of her command chair as she stared at the devastation on the main screen. They were too late to prevent this disaster, but maybe not too late to help survivors. "Take us into orbit," she ordered, and try to establish communication with whoever sent that distress signal. As the horizon moved closer to the planet, the full scope of the catastrophe became clear. Massive alien ships, dark and angular like predatory insects, circled the world like vultures. They were systematically destroying everything on the surface. Turning a once beautiful world into a burning wasteland, Dr. Hayes worked frantically at her station, trying to establish contact with any survivors. After several tense minutes, she managed to lock onto a weak signal from the planet's surface. "I've got something, Captain. It's coming from what appears to be an underground shelter near the planet's northern continent." The communication that came through was filled with static, but the voice that spoke was unmistakably alien. Hayes quickly ran it through her translation algorithms, and soon they could understand the words. "Unknown vessel," the voice said. "Please identify yourself. Are you here to help us, or to join our destruction?" Torres stepped forward. "This is Captain Maria Torres of the human vessel Horizon. We received your distress signal and came to help. What is your situation?" There was a long pause before the alien voice responded. "Humans. We do not know this species. But if you truly come to help, then you are welcome. I am Veltar, leader of what remains of the Kailani people. We are dying, and our world dies with us." Torres felt her heart break at the despair in the alien's voice. "We're going to help you, Veltar. Can you tell us what's happening down there?" "The Thakari have come for the final harvest," Veltar explained. "For 300 of your years, they have hunted us like animals. They take our people for food and sport, and now they grow tired of the game. They wish to end it completely." The bridge crew exchanged horrified glances. They were witnessing genocide on an unimaginable scale. "Who are the Thakari?" Torres asked. "They are predators from the core worlds," Veltar replied. "They consider all other species to be either food or slaves. We Kailani have never harmed any living thing, but to them, we are nothing more than cattle to be slaughtered when they choose." Dr. Hayes looked up from her console with tears in her eyes. "Captain, I'm reading massive life sign concentrations in several underground facilities. There might be millions of survivors hiding below ground." Torres made her decision quickly. "Veltar, we're coming down to your location. Prepare your people to receive us. You would come to the surface?" Veltar asked in surprise. "The Thakari? Ships patrol constantly. You will be destroyed." "Let us worry about that," Torres replied grimly. Commander Wilson looked at her with concern. "Captain, we don't know anything about these Thakari or their capabilities. This could be suicide." Torres nodded maybe, "but we can't help anyone from up here. We need to see the situation firsthand and figure out what we can do." The Horizon shuttle bay was quickly prepared for launch. Torres led a small team, including Dr. Hayes, Commander Wilson, and a squad of Marines down to the planet's surface. As their shuttle broke through the atmosphere, they got their first close look at the devastation. What had once been a beautiful world, covered with crystal cities and carefully tended gardens, was now a smoking ruin. The Kailani had clearly been an advanced civilization, but everything they had built was being systematically destroyed. The shuttle landed near an entrance to the underground facility where Veltar was waiting. As the human team stepped out onto the alien world, they were met by a group of Kailani survivors. The aliens were even more striking in person than they had appeared in the distress signal images. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with slender builds and skin that had a slight greenish tint. Their faces were elongated and graceful, with large eyes that held an ancient sadness. They moved with fluid grace, but Torres could see the weight of despair in their every gesture. Veltar stepped forward to greet them. He was older than the others, with silver markings on his skin that Torres assumed indicated age or rank. "Welcome to Keleth, Captain Torres," he said in accented but clear English. Hayes' translation protocols had worked well, though I fear you have come only to witness our final destruction. Torres looked around at the devastation surrounding them. Even the air tasted of smoke and death. "Tell us everything, Veltar. How did this start? How long has this been going on?" Veltar led them into the underground facility, which was filled with thousands of Kailani refugees. The aliens had created a remarkable shelter, with living spaces carved from the rock and powered by some kind of clean energy source. But Torres could see that resources were running low, and many of the refugees appeared weak and sick. "The Thakari first came to our world 3 centuries ago," Veltar explained as they walked through the facility. "We welcomed them as we would any visitors. We are a peaceful people, Captain Torres. We have never developed weapons of war because we have never needed them. We settle our differences through discussion and compromise." Dr. Hayes was taking readings with her equipment and making notes. "Captain, their technology is incredible. The energy systems here are at least 50 years ahead of anything we have on Earth. But not detecting any weapons at all." Veltar nodded sadly. We learned too late that not all species share our peaceful nature. The Thakari saw our lack of weapons as weakness. They began taking our people for their markets on other worlds. We tried to reason with them, to find a peaceful solution, but they only laughed at us. You never fought back? Wilson asked. Could we? Velta replied. We have no concept of killing. It is simply not in our nature. We tried to hide, to protect ourselves through technology and barriers, but the Thakari adapted. They began to see us not as a resource to be harvested, but as prey to be hunted for sport. Torres felt sick as she listened to the story. Entire. Civilization had been reduced to this because they couldn't bring themselves to fight back, even for survival. The hunting has continued for generations, Veltar continued. They would come to our world periodically, take whoever they wanted, and leave the rest of us to rebuild. We thought perhaps if we could make ourselves useful to them, they would eventually leave us in peace. But their appetite for destruction only grew. They entered a large chamber filled with Kailani children. Torres was struck by how quiet they were, their large eyes staring at the human visitors with curiosity, but also fear. These children had known nothing but terror and hiding their entire lives. 6 months ago, the Thakari began the final harvest, Veltar explained. They decided they were tired of the game. Instead of taking some of us, they came to take all of us. Those they cannot use immediately, they kill for sport or simply for the pleasure of destruction. Dr. Hayes looked up from her readings with excitement. Captain, you need to see this. The Kailani's scientific knowledge is extraordinary. Their understanding of energy manipulation, biological sciences, and space-time physics could advance human knowledge by centuries. Torres understood the implications immediately. This wasn't just about saving an alien species from genocide. The Kailani possessed knowledge that could benefit all of galactic civilization. But more importantly to her, they were intelligent beings who deserved to live. How many of you are left? Torres asked Veltar. Perhaps 2 million on this world, he replied. There were once billions of us spread across dozens of worlds in this system. Now we are all that remain. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. A young Kailani rushed up to Veltar and spoke quickly in their native language. What is it? Torres asked. Veltar's expression grew even more grave. The Kari hunters have detected your shuttle. They are coming to investigate. You must leave. Immediately, or you will share our fate. Torres looked around at the frightened faces of the Kailani refugees, at the children who had never known peace, at the advanced civilization that was being destroyed for no reason other than cruelty. No, she said firmly. We're not leaving. It's time someone stood up to these Thakari. Veltar stared at her in shock. Captain Torres, you do not understand. The Thakari are warriors, born and bred. They have conquered dozens of species across the galaxy. Your single ship cannot stand against them. Torres smiled grimly. Maybe not. But we're about to find out what happens when they pick on someone who can fight back. The Thakari hunting party arrived within hours. From the underground shelter, Torres and her team watched through the Kailani's monitoring systems as 3 alien vessels landed near their shuttle. The ships were sleek and predatory, built for speed and violence rather than exploration. The creatures that emerged from the ships were everything Veltar had described, and worse. The Thakari stood nearly 10 feet tall, with muscular builds covered in dark, armor-like skin. Their faces were elongated like reptiles, with rows of sharp teeth and cold, calculating eyes. They moved with the confidence of apex predators who had never met anything they couldn't kill. They're scanning our shuttle, reported Lieutenant Chen, who had remained aboard the Horizon in orbit. Captain, I'm reading at least 50 more Thakari ships heading toward our position. Torres felt her stomach tighten. She had hoped they might be able to negotiate, or at least understand what they were dealing with before committing to action. But it was clear the Thakari had no interest in talking. Dr. Hayes, she said, can you establish communication with them? Hayes worked quickly at her portable equipment. After a few minutes, she managed to patch into the Thakari communication network. The voices that came through were harsh and guttural, filled with what sounded like amusement. I can translate their language, Hayes said. They're discussing Us like we're some kind of unexpected bonus. They're debating whether to kill us immediately or take us back to their ships for interrogation and torture. Veltar looked at Torres with deep sadness in his large eyes. This is what they do, Captain. They find joy in the suffering of others. Please, take your people and leave while you still can. Do not let them add humanity to their list of conquered species. Torres shook her head firmly. We're not leaving without you and your people. That is impossible, Veltar replied. There are 2 million of us here. Your ship cannot carry so many, and the Thakari will never allow us to escape. Commander Wilson pulled Torres aside. Captain, we need to think about this strategically. We could try to evacuate some of the Kailani, maybe the children, and their most important leaders. But Veltar is right. We can't save them all. Torres looked around the underground facility at the faces of the Kailani refugees, mothers holding their children, elderly individuals who had lived through centuries of persecution, young adults who had never known freedom. The thought of choosing who lived and who died made her feel sick. There has to be another way, she said. Dr. Hayes looked up from her analysis of the Kailani technology. Captain, I think there is. Kailani have defensive systems that are incredibly advanced. They've been hiding and running for so long that they never considered using their technology offensively. But their energy shields and barrier systems are more powerful than anything we have. What are you suggesting? Torres asked. We combine their defensive technology with our weapons and tactics, Hayes explained excitedly. The Kailani can't bring themselves to fight, but they could help us fight more effectively. Veltar overheard the conversation and approached them. You would truly fight the Thakari for us, your species that we have just met? Torres looked him in the eye. Veltar, where I come from, we have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Your people are facing extinction because of cruelty and greed. If we have the power to stop that, then we have the responsibility to act. Veltar stared at her for a long moment, and Torres could see tears forming in his large eyes. Centuries, no one has ever offered to help us. Why would you risk yourselves for strangers? Because it's the right thing to do, Torres replied simply. The first attack came at dawn. The Thakari had grown impatient with studying the human shuttle and decided to assault the underground facility directly. They came in fast and hard, using powerful energy weapons to blast through the reinforced entrances. Torres had spent the night working with her Marines and a group of young Kailani volunteers to set up defensive positions throughout the facility. The Kailani couldn't bring themselves to use weapons directly, but they could operate their advanced shield generators and provide technical support. The battle was unlike anything Torres had ever experienced. The Thakari fought with savage efficiency, using their superior size and strength to devastating effect. Their weapons were designed to cause maximum pain as well as damage, reflecting their sadistic nature. But humanity had something the Thakari had never encountered before, opponents who could match their tactical thinking while fighting for something greater than themselves. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez led the human Marines in a fighting retreat through the facility's corridors, using the Kailani's knowledge of the layout to set up ambush points and choke points. The aliens' advanced shielding technology turned corners and doorways into virtually impregnable fortresses. These things are tough, Rodriguez reported over the CUM system as his squad held a key intersection, but they're not invincible. Their armor has weak points at the joints, and they're not used to fighting opponents who shoot back. Dr. Hayes had set up a command center deep in the facility, coordinating between the human forces and the Kailani technical teams. Captain, the Kailani energy systems can be configured to disrupt the Thakari weapons. It won't destroy them, but it will reduce their effectiveness significantly. The battle raged for hours. The Thakari had expected to face cowering prey, not organized resistance. They were forced to commit more and more forces to the underground facility, which gave Torres the opening she needed. Chen, this is Torres, she called to the horizon in orbit. I need you to target the Thakari ships on the surface. The weapons spread. Captain, there are 53 Thakari vessels in orbit around the planet, Chen replied. If we open fire, we'll be outnumbered 50-1. We better make our shots count. Torres replied grimly. The Horizon opened fire on the Thakari ships on the planet's surface, destroying 2 of them before the orbital fleet could react. The surprise attack bought valuable time, but Torres knew it wouldn't last long. In the underground facility, the tide of battle was turning. The human Marines had inflicted heavy casualties on the Thokari assault force, but they were running low on ammunition and energy for the defensive systems. During a brief lull in the fighting, Veltar approached Torres at the command center. His usually composed demeanor was shaken by the violence he had witnessed. "Captain Torres," he said quietly, "I have watched your people fight today. You show no joy in killing, no pleasure in causing pain. You fight only to protect those who cannot protect themselves. This is something we Kailani have never understood, but now I see its necessity." Torres looked at him with exhaustion clear on her face. Several of her Marines had been killed in the fighting, including young Private Tommy Kim, who had just celebrated his 20th birthday the week before. The cost of doing the right thing was proving to be higher than she had hoped. "Wish there had been another way," she said. Veltar nodded slowly. "Perhaps there was, long ago. But we Kailani chose the path of absolute peace, even in the face of absolute evil. We thought our unwillingness to fight would eventually shame our enemies into leaving us alone. Instead, it only made us easier prey." A new wave of Thakari forces was massing at the facility's main entrance. Torres could see on the monitors that these warriors were different from the first assault force. They were larger, more heavily armed, and moved with the discipline of elite troops. Captain Sergeant Rodriguez called over the com. "We've got company coming, and these ones look like they mean business." Torres made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She opened a communication channel to the Thakari forces. "This is Captain Maria Torres of the human vessel Horizon." She broadcast, "You are committing genocide against a peaceful species. I order you to withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response came quickly, translated through Dr. Hayes' equipment. The voice was deep and filled with contempt. "Human, you have interfered in matters that do not concern you. The Kailani are our property, to do with as we please. Surrender now, and we may allow some of your kind to live as slaves. Continue to resist, and we will hunt your species across the galaxy until none remain." Torres felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. She had tried diplomacy, tried reasoning, tried everything except the one thing the Thakari understood. "Then you've made your choice," she replied. "And so have we." She turned to her communications officer. "Chen, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we've made contact with 2 alien species. One is peaceful and facing extinction. The other is a genocidal empire that has just threatened to hunt down and destroy humanity. Request immediate military support." Captain Wilson said quietly, "You realize what this means? We're not just fighting for the Kailani anymore. We're potentially starting an interstellar war." Torres looked around the command center at the Kailani refugees, at her exhausted Marines preparing for another assault, at Dr. Hayes working frantically to find some technological advantage that might save them all. "No," she said firmly. "Not starting a war, or finishing one that the Thakari started 3 centuries ago. The only difference is that now they're facing opponents who fight back." The second assault began with a fury that made the first look like a minor skirmish. But this time, the humans and Kailani were ready. The line had been drawn, and there would be no backing down. Asterisk, the message from the Horizon reached Earth Command. 3 weeks after the first battle on Keleth, when Admiral Frank Cole read Captain Torres' report in his office at Fleet Headquarters, he had to read it twice before the full implications sank in. First contact with alien life, genocide on an unimaginable scale, a threat against all of humanity. And one of his best captains had decided to fight an interstellar war with a single exploration vessel. "Get me President Martinez on the secure line," Cole ordered his aide, "and convene an emergency session of the Defense Council. We have a situation." Within hours, the highest levels of Earth's government were debating humanity's response to the crisis. The debate was fierce and divided the leadership completely. "Torres has exceeded her authority by an impossible margin," argued Secretary of Defense Robert Hayes. She's committed an act of war against an unknown alien empire without any authorization whatsoever. We should recall her immediately and issue formal apologies." President Martinez listened to the arguments from both sides, but her mind kept returning to the images Torres had sent. The burning cities, the desperate refugees, the children who had never known safety, and most disturbing of all, the casual cruelty of the Thakari as they hunted intelligent beings for sport. "What's our current military capability?" she asked. Admiral Cole. Cole pulled up the latest fleet reports. "We have 47 active warships ranging from destroyers to heavy cruisers. Another 100 ships in various stages of construction. Our ground forces total about 2 million combat-ready personnel across all branches. And what do we know about Thakari military strength?" Dr. Lisa Park, the government's chief xenobiologist, stepped forward with the analysis her team had completed. Based on Captain Torres's data, the Thakari appear to control at least 30 star systems. Conservative estimates put their fleet strength at over 1,000 vessels, possibly much more. They've been conquering other species for centuries. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the numbers. Humanity was outnumbered at least 20-1, possibly much worse. "Madam President," said General William Ross, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, "from a purely military standpoint, this is suicide. We cannot win a war against an empire that size." But President Martinez was thinking about more than just military calculations. She was thinking about what kind of species humanity wanted to be as they stepped onto the galactic stage. What happened to the other species that Thakari conquered? She asked Dr. Park. Park consulted her notes grimly. "Based on the limited data we have, they were either enslaved, used as food sources, or hunted to extinction. The Thakari appear to view all other intelligent life as inferior and exist only for their use. And if we withdraw, if we abandon the Kailani and pretend this never happened?" "The Thakari have already threatened to hunt humanity across the galaxy," Cole replied. "They view our intervention as an act of war. Backing down now might delay the conflict, but it won't prevent it." Martinez made her decision. "Admiral Cole, I want you to take a fleet to support Captain Torres. We're not abandoning the Kailani, and we're not backing down from bullies." "Madam President," Secretary Hayes protested, "this could mean the end of human civilization." Martinez looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders. "Maybe, but I'd rather we end fighting for what's right than survive by turning our backs on genocide." "Admiral, how quickly can you get a fleet ready?" Cole was already running calculations in his head. "I can have 15 ships ready to depart. Within 48 hours, the rest will need more time." "Do it, and send a message to every human colony and outpost. We're mobilizing for war." Meanwhile, on Keleth, the situation was growing desperate. The Horizon had been fighting a running battle with Thakari forces for 3 weeks, using hit-and-run tactics to keep the enemy off balance. But Captain Torres knew they couldn't hold out much longer. Underground facility had become a fortress. But food and medical supplies were running low. The Kalani had managed to evacuate about half their population to deeper shelters. But 2 million people needed a lot of resources to survive. Dr. Hayes had been working around the clock with Kailani scientists to improve their defensive capabilities. The collaboration had produced remarkable results. Human weapons technology combined with Kailani energy manipulation had created shield systems and weapons that were far more effective than either species could manage alone, Captain reported Lieutenant Chen from her position at the sensor station they had set up in the shelter. "I'm reading massive energy signatures at the edge of the system. Something big is coming out of faster-than-light travel." Torres felt her heart sink. They had been expecting Thakari reinforcements, and she knew the Horizon couldn't fight an entire fleet. But as the sensors resolved the approaching ships, Chen's voice filled with excitement. "Captain, those are human vessels. Admiral Cole is here with 15 ships." The relief Torres felt was overwhelming. She had been prepared to die fighting for the Kailani, but now there was hope that they might actually win. Admiral Cole's first transmission was formal and brief. "Captain Torres, you are hereby relieved of command, pending a full investigation of your actions." Torres prepared to respond, but Cole continued. "However, given the current tactical situation, I am temporarily reinstating you as fleet liaison for Kailani relations. Now, brief me on the enemy capabilities." Over the next few hours, Torres explained everything they had learned about the Thakari. Their ships were fast and heavily armed, but they relied on overwhelming force rather than sophisticated tactics. They had never faced opponents who could match their technology and fighting ability. Cole listened to the briefings and studied the tactical data with growing anger. The images of Thakari atrocities reminded him why he had joined the military. "In the first place, Captain Torres," he said finally, "I came here to arrest you for violating orders. But after seeing what these creatures have done, I think I understand your decision. The question now is whether we can actually win this fight." The answer came sooner than expected. Long-range sensors detected a massive Thakari fleet approaching the system. More than 200 ships, including vessels larger than anything humanity had ever built. But as the Thakari fleet approached, they received an unexpected message. Dr. Hayes had been monitoring alien communication channels and picked up transmissions from other star systems. "Captain Admiral," she called excitedly, "you need to hear this. We're getting reports from across Thakari space. Other species are rising up. The news of our resistance has spread, and enslaved peoples throughout their empire are rebelling." The tactical display showed red markers appearing across dozens of star systems as the Thakari found themselves fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. Species that had been enslaved for generations were suddenly fighting back, inspired by the example of humans defending the Kailani. Admiral Cole studied the developing situation with the eye of an experienced strategist. "This changes everything. We can coordinate with these other resistance movements. We might actually have a chance." Velta, who had been quietly observing the human military planning, stepped forward. "Admiral Cole, there is something you should know. The Kailani have long maintained secret communications with other peaceful species throughout this region of space. We can help you contact them." Over the following days, a remarkable alliance began to form. Humans provided military leadership and tactics. The Kailani offered advanced technology and communication networks. And across the Thakari Empire, dozens of species began coordinating their resistance efforts. But the Thakari were not going to give up their empire without a fight. Intelligence reports indicated they were massing their entire fleet for a decisive assault on Keleth. If they could crush the rebellion at its source, they could deal with the other uprisings later. As Admiral Cole prepared his small fleet for the battle that would determine the fate of multiple species, he received one final message from Earth. President Martinez herself appeared on the communication screen. "Admiral, the entire human fleet is en route to your position. Every ship we have, every Marine, every pilot, we're coming in force, and we're coming to end this war once and for all." Cole looked out at the stars, knowing that in the next few weeks, either humanity would emerge as a major galactic power, or they would be extinct. There was no middle ground left. The simple plea for help had become something much larger. It had become a war for the future of intelligent life in the galaxy, and humanity intended to win it. 6 months after the first human ships arrived at Keleth, the war had spread across 100 star systems. What had begun as a desperate defense of a dying species had become the largest military conflict the galaxy had ever seen. Fleet Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the new flagship Unity, watching the final preparations for the assault on Thak Prime, the capital world of the Thakari Empire. Around her, the largest combined fleet in galactic history prepared for battle. 300 human vessels, 50 Kailani support ships, and nearly 100 vessels from the dozen other species that had joined the Galactic Liberation Front. The transformation of Captain Torres into Fleet Admiral Torres had been as dramatic as the transformation of humanity itself. Earth's industrial capacity had been completely restructured for war production. Every shipyard worked around the clock building new vessels. Every factory had been converted to produce weapons, armor, and supplies for the millions of soldiers now fighting across the galaxy. The cost had been enormous. Entire human colonies had been evacuated when Thakari fleets attacked them. The mining colony on Kepler 186F had been completely destroyed, along with its 50,000 inhabitants. The agricultural world of Roswan 28b had been burned from orbit, creating a food shortage that still plagued human space, but for every human loss, the Thakari had paid a higher price. The species that had conquered through fear, an overwhelming force, had never faced opponents who could match their ruthlessness. While fighting for something greater than conquest, Commander Rebecca Martinez, who had taken over as Torres' tactical officer after Dr. Hayes died in the Battle of Proxima Centauri, looked up from her analysis screens. "Admiral, all fleet commanders report ready for the final assault. The Thakari have concentrated 90% of their remaining forces around Thick Prime." Torres nodded grimly. The battle ahead would determine everything, if they could break the Thakari here at their homeworld, the war would be won. They failed, the liberation movement would collapse, and the surviving human colonies would face extinction. "Signal from the surface, Admiral," reported Lieutenant David Kim, who had survived 3 major battles and now served as communications chief. "Veltar is ready to begin the operation." Torres looked at the tactical display showing Thak Prime. The world below was a fortress, surrounded by massive orbital defense platforms and protected by the largest Thakari fleet ever assembled. But the planet also held millions of enslaved beings from dozens of species, all waiting for liberation. Veltar and a team of Kailani infiltrators had spent weeks sneaking onto the planet's surface using their advanced stealth technology. Their mission was to disable the planetary shields at the exact moment the fleet began its assault. "All ships, this is Admiral Torres," she broadcast to the combined fleet. "Today we end this war. Today we free every enslaved being in Thakari space. Today we show the galaxy that freedom is worth fighting for." The response was immediate. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species, all united in common cause, began their final approach to Thak Prime. The Thakari fleet moved to intercept them. The enemy vessels were massive and heavily armed, designed to intimidate as much as to fight. Their dark hulls were covered with spikes and blades, and their weapons were built to cause maximum suffering. But they had never faced anything like the combined fleet now approaching their home world. Human ships provided tactical coordination and heavy firepower. Kailani vessels offered advanced shielding and energy weapons. The liberated species each contributed their own unique capabilities to the alliance. The battle began at maximum range, with both fleets exchanging massive volleys of energy weapons and missiles. The space around Thak Prime filled with the bright flashes of exploding ships and the deadly dance of hundreds of vessels, maneuvering for advantage. Torres watched the tactical display as the battle developed. The Thakari were fighting with desperate fury, knowing that defeat meant the end of their empire. But the Liberation Fleet fought with something more powerful than desperation. They fought with hope. "Enemy flagship is moving to engage us directly," reported Martinez. "It's twice the size of anything we've seen before." The Thakari command ship was indeed massive, easily the largest vessel in the battle. Its hull was covered with weapon emplacements, and it moved with predatory grace toward the Unity. It's all batteries. "Target the enemy flagship," Torres ordered. "Let's see how tough these predators really are." Here at the Unity and the Thakari flagship exchanged devastating volleys at close range. The human ship's shields flared as Thakari weapons pounded against them, but the enemy vessel was taking damage as well. Human plasma cannons and railguns enhanced with Kailani energy technology were proving remarkably effective against Thakari. Armor as the two flagships dueled, the rest of the battle raged around them. Smaller human ships used their superior speed and maneuverability to strike at the flanks of the larger Thakari vessels. Kailani support ships provided shield support and electronic warfare capabilities. The ships of the liberated species fought with the fury of beings who had nothing left to lose. Admiral Kim reported, "Signal from Veltar on the surface. The planetary shields are down." Torres felt a surge of hope. With the shields disabled, they could begin landing troops on the planet's surface to liberate the slave camps and support. "Facilities launch all assault shuttles," she ordered. "Begin the ground assault." Hundreds of small craft launched from the Liberation Fleet, carrying Marines and soldiers from a dozen different species toward the surface of Thok Prime. The Thokari had never faced a planetary invasion before. It had always been the invaders, never the invaded. The ground battle was brutal but one-sided. Thokari ground forces were used to fighting cowering slaves and helpless prisoners. They had no experience with organized resistance from trained soldiers who fought back with equal fury. Human Marines, supported by Kailani, energy weapons, and fighters from the liberated species, swept across the planet's surface. They freed millions of enslaved beings from work camps and breeding facilities. The liberation forces showed no mercy to Thokari guards and overseers. But they protected the innocent with the same determination they had shown throughout the war in space. The battle was reaching its climax. The Thokari flagship was heavily damaged but still fighting. Its weapons had nearly overwhelmed the Unity's shields. Torres knew the next few minutes would determine the outcome. Admiral Martinez called out, "I'm reading massive energy build-up in the enemy flagship. I think they're preparing to ram us." Torres watched as the Thokari command ship turned directly toward the Unity. The enemy commander had decided that if he couldn't win the battle, he would at least take the human flagship with him. "All power to forward shields," Torres ordered. "Prepare for impact." But the ram attack never came. At the last moment, the Thokari flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The Liberation Fleet's combined firepower had finally overwhelmed its defenses. With their flagship destroyed and their homeworld under assault, the remaining Thokari fleet began to break apart. Some ships fled toward the outer system, while others continued fighting with suicidal determination. Admiral Kim reported, "We're receiving surrender transmissions from multiple Thokari vessels. They're requesting terms." Torres looked around the bridge at her crew. These people had followed her from that first desperate battle on Keleth to this moment of ultimate victory. They had lost friends and colleagues, seen horrors that would haunt them forever, but they had never wavered in their commitment to justice. "Signal all Thokari vessels," she ordered. "Unconditional surrender only. They will stand trial for their crimes, but they will be treated according to the laws of war. We're not like them." Over the following hours, the remnants of the Thokari fleet surrendered. The great empire that had terrorized dozens of species for centuries was finally broken. On the planet's surface, the liberation continued. Millions of enslaved beings from across the galaxy were freed from the camps and facilities where they had been held. Many had been prisoners for generations and had never seen freedom. Beltar met with Torres in the ruins of the Thokari capital city. The Kailani leader looked older than when they had first met, aged by the weight of war and loss. But there was also something new in his eyes, hope for the future. "Admiral Torres," he said, "when we sent that first desperate signal into space, we never imagined it would lead to this. You have not only saved my people, but liberated an entire region of the galaxy." Torres looked around at the city where millions had lived in slavery just days before. They were free, but freedom came with its own challenges. These species would need help rebuilding their civilizations, establishing governments, and learning to live without fear. "The war is over, Veltar, but our work is just beginning. These people will need protection while they rebuild. The galaxy is going to need some kind of organization to prevent anything like the Thokari Empire from rising again." Veltar nodded. Slowly, the Galactic Liberation Front could become something more permanent. A council of free species dedicated to protecting the innocent and preventing future genocides. Torres smiled at the idea. Humanity had come to space as explorers and scientists. They had been forced to become warriors by circumstances beyond their control. Now they had the chance to become something even greater. Guardians of freedom for all intelligent life. As she stood in the ruins of the Thokari capital, surrounded by beings from dozens of species who had fought together for liberation, Torres reflected on how much had changed since that first desperate plea for help. The message had been simple: help us. The response had indeed been war. But from that war had come something unprecedented in galactic history: a true alliance of free species. United not by conquest or fear, but by shared values and mutual respect. The plea had been answered, and the galaxy would never be the same.